Good afternoon, this is Heidi Meyers, Immigration and Economic Sanctions Attorney. Today we're going to talk about a proposed rule by Department of Homeland Security, DHS, which would really expand biometrics and the invasion of personal privacy to include not just immigrants, but also millions of U.S. citizens and permanent residents. On September 11, 2020, DHS proposed a new rule which greatly broadens the definition of biometrics. So the first aspect is that biometrics will now include not only your fingerprint, your palm print, your facial image for facial recognition, photos of scars, skin marks, and tattoos, your signature, your voice print, that's the sound of your voice, your iris in your pupil, and also your DNA. So this new rule really expands the definition of biometrics and makes it very broad. Second, the rule states that not only foreign nationals or immigrants are going to be subjected to biometrics exams, but also U.S. citizens and permanent residents, where they're petitioners or where they're in some way associated with an immigration application or benefit. So, and additionally, biometrics exams would also include the principals of EB-5 regional centers. If you might know, the EB-5 Immigration Through Investment Program. So the principals, the owners, those who own or control an EB-5 regional center would be subjected to biometrics. If the EB-5 regional center principal is a company, then anyone with an ownership interest, control, or beneficial interest in the company would have to go for these biometrics exams. So we're talking about a huge number of people involved that would end up submitting their biometrics, many of them to be U.S. citizens. By its own projection, according to the proposed rule, this will mean that about 2.17 million more people will have to submit biometrics each year. So this is going to involve taking biometrics from millions of U.S. citizens and permanent residents. Third, the rule eliminates the presumption of good moral character for children under 14. So children under 14 are no longer presumed to have good moral character. And children under 14 are to submit to biometrics exams unless there's a specific exemption. So they're apparently very worried about small children being involved in terrorist organizations or gangs or criminal activity, or even if they're not, maybe they'll grow up to be criminals. So as you see, certain prejudices and certain outlooks have worked their way into these proposed rules. Okay, so first, a broadly expanded definition of biometrics. Second, it's going to be applied to U.S. citizens and permanent residents. Third, it's going to be expanded to young children. Fourth, regarding DNA, this provides that DNA collection in relative petitions will become standardized. So in the past, actually up until the present, DNA tests were used where, for example, there wasn't, the individual didn't have enough documentation to prove, say, a parent-child relationship, or somehow the documents, there weren't sufficient documents, or there was a suspicion of fraud. So there's always been DNA collection in the past where there was an issue in a relative petition, say a U.S. citizen child petitioning for their parent, or the opposite way around, where you wanted to prove a family relationship and somehow the documents were not enough, or, for example, in a consulate abroad, there was a high rate of fraud and there was some issue in a particular case. So yes, DNA collection had been used in the past where there was an issue, where there might have been some fraud, or they're just not sure, they can't tell from the paperwork. So this would expand DNA collection to just about all family petitions. So this is a huge expansion of DNA collection. And not just to relative petitions, but would be applied to all unaccompanied minor children in removal proceedings. And it could be applied even more broadly than that. So rather than using DNA tests in certain specific cases where there's an issue, it generally expands DNA test collection across the board, where you have a relative petition or you have a child in removal proceedings. So that's a huge, huge expansion. Now, another aspect is there's no provision there's no time limit on how long they can keep your biometrics or your DNA. They can keep your biometrics and your DNA for an indefinite period and use it at any point in the future for basically any purpose they see fit, and you're not going to know about it. They're not going to notify you that they're using your DNA or they're using your facial image or your voice prints for something. So they also reserve to themselves the right to share all this biometrics data to any federal, state, or local agency, to Interpol, to other foreign governments. So this is a very broad invasion of personal privacy. Next, they propose continuous vetting of foreign nationals in the U.S. who have received an immigration benefit. So any foreign national in the United States who's already received an immigration benefit would be under continuous vetting, basically continuous surveillance, until they become a U.S. citizen. Think about that. So, this brings to mind George Orwell's 1984, totalitarian governments keeping track of their population's every move and monitoring them and suppressing them. And this is not just hypothetical. As we know, the protests over the summer with Black Lives Matter and other organizations in Portland, Oregon, the federal government sent out ICE and CBP agents, basically unidentified federal agencies, to detain people without cause, detain U.S. citizens without cause, without informing them of any charges, just sort of picking them up and spiriting them away. They had no identification. They never charged people. Later on, people were released. But as we can see, CBP and ICE are already being used not just for immigration enforcement, but also as a tool to suppress U.S. citizens exercising their lawful rights to protest and assemble and express their First Amendment opinions. So this is a very grave danger to our civil liberties and civil rights, and I hope that you will contact your congressmen and representatives to oppose this, and also submit comments in opposition to this new rule. So this is a proposed rule. It's not in effect yet, and hopefully nothing more will happen before the new administration comes into office. But your problem is, once something becomes a final regulation, it becomes harder to change. And once government agencies are used to collecting all this huge amounts of data on you, it's very hard to take that system apart and to stop it. All right, so this is Heidi Meyers, Immigration and Economic Sanctions Attorney. I'm at 11 Broadway, Suite 925, New York, New York, 10004, and my number is 212-791-4007 or 646-508-5225. And my email is heidimeyerslaw@gmail.com. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Thank you. And if you have any ideas for topics for videos, let me know. All right. Have a good day. Bye-bye.